Hello, 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 hello. Welcome to this broadcast once again. As I said the other day, you can call me the philosopher, you can also call me Elder. I'll respond to each one of them. On this channel, we deal with the controversies that come with the Black empowerment movement. As you can see me, my typical black smoke. When you see me wearing this thing, I'm just conveying the message that wearing black is not for something bad. It's not for a funeral, actually. I'm celebrating my blackness, hence the wearing of the smoke. Um, I bought lots of them to wear to demonstrate that I love being black and described as such. God bless you. If you're on Facebook, um, like it. If you're on YouTube, like it, call others, subscribe, hit the notification button. In fact, let us help each other send the message across. Because I mean you and I, in this color, are a product of years of miseducation. And we need tons and tons of, re-education to be able to emancipate our minds from certain chains that hold us back. So this is the Tentance channel, and we are here to deal with controversies concerning Black empowerment. What is today's topic? Simple. Why? Why are Blacks the poorest in nations where the other races? Why do they live in the poorest neighborhood? Or why do Blacks or Africans tend to live in the poorest countries? Now, we are answering this question because some have misconstrued this apparent obvious, wrong with curses and our inability to think for ourselves and the rest. But none could be further from the truth. And that's what we want to touch on today. Call a friend, share it with a friend, share. Share this message because this message is worth its weight, or should I say, its length in gold. Because you can't wait, its length in gold. So share the message so that many things bothering you, you come to an understanding so that you can stand your ground against those that want to bully you. Okay, why do Africans, blacks, live in the poorest neighborhood, poorest countries, are the poorest in any mixed society? Simple. And I like to do it one after the other because I like to communicate in a manner that is simple for every one of us to understand. Now, the first one is that these ones that are now being called blacks, bona fide citizens of countries and the rest, these in the diaspora were once slaves. If you see an African in the diaspora, in the Caribbeans, in the Americas, in England, who is a citizen, um, who is a citizen not because of naturalization or anything, but who is a citizen as at the time constitutions were promulgated in Europe and the Americas, such a person became that because the person was a descendant of slaves. Oh, please please don't say something like no, don't go there again. Don't say that it's because people were asleep, so then they cannot build wealth. Let me come to it. Okay, many of the very rich people we see around, they build their riches over centuries. It's from generation to generation. It's from years of training and changing and tuning of their minds from generation to generation. That's how come they have attained this status. Unfortunately, these Africans in these areas who are now having to, form Caribbean countries because now the former slave masters are no more there and all the rest of them. These were people who for centuries were told they were nothing, were denied of earning no wage, were denied of education mostly, were actually told consistently not to think for themselves, and they were taught that all the thinking was done for them. These were people who worked for people for decades for free and they own nothing because they themselves were property. Now, because they did not have the foundation that the rest of the population, who were usually white or mixed race, had, they didn't have the foundation to start from. And there's a proverb that we like to say around here in my country that if you are born or an anthill, it doesn't take long for you to get taller. In the same way, if you are born in a valley, it takes a while before you get to the surface. And so these people are coming from centuries of deprivation, centuries of deprivation, hence their obvious disadvantage. So it's not like the country started and they're all on the same footing, and somehow they are the ones in the favelas in Brazil, somehow they are the ones in the ghettos in the US. Somehow, no. They were denied all opportunities to climb for centuries. They were denied education deliberately to keep them down. They were denied any idea of wanting to strive to be better because that threatened people. They were denied the chance to want to aspire for anything greater than service. And that is how come now they, as a legacy of the brutalities of the past, they find themselves in the worst places. They find themselves having the low end jobs. They find themselves being the poorer in each country. It's not because of their color, it's because of the legacy of slavery. So the first reason why blacks are found in the worst of places, the developed world, and usually are worse off in the developed world and in the developing world are found in the worst of countries is because of slavery in the developing world, because of the consequence of slavery and colonialism and the rest of them. So that's the number one reason. What is the second reason why this thing happens? Everywhere you go, blacks are the worst off. They're in the worst places. Everywhere you go, even if people who are whiter, even if they are the minority, they tend to be the ones who become presidents and the rest. Why everybody wants to look white, because there appear to be this coloration of poverty and deprivation. And it is all from a legacy of history. That's what we hear that if you don't learn from our history, we tend to repeat it. Now, the second thing is that there was a system. It was not only a consequence of brutality of slavery, but there was a systematic effort in the past to keep such people poor, because the slave masters knew anybody becoming rich became empowered. Anybody getting educated actually became powerful and will tend to want to rebel. But even in these circumstances, there are places in Jamaica where slaves rebelled successfully and formed their own colonies. Even places in the United States, several places. There were several places where some liberated themselves and even liberated others. But there was a systematic program. In fact, even after slavery, there was still a systematic program that we call severally, apartheid system and the rest. That said, that kept blacks down, kept them in the worst places, kept them on the worst of lands, kept them, in the worst of schools, actually. So the seeming, and I'm using seeming advisedly, the seeming level playing field we see now is a very recent phenomenon, and it's not even completely level playing field now. So that is how come. So it has never been because of, some time ago there was this impression that, the Africans cannot do sports and the rest. So almost all the developed countries, their sporting teams were white. Now, once the segregation thing was broken, once the apartheid system was broken, and blacks were allowed to compete, they subsequently took over the teams. So now you see those countries that have white and black populations. You realize that most of their teams are full of mixed race or blacks. It is because the level playing field was given them, and they restricted the admission only to talent, and hence the blacks took over. This will happen anywhere where that particular chance is given. So that is the second reason. The third reason is that there was a looting, not even stealing is an understatement. There was a looting of Africa's resources under colonialism for about 2 centuries and more in many places. Sometimes it's sad when you hear people talk as if colonialism was some kind of lesson. No, go to the museums around the world and see the artifacts, the gold, the brass, the bronze, all kinds of sculptures, all kinds of artifacts. These are the ones on display. The ones that are not on display, another thing to talk about, the gold bars, the diamonds, and the rest. And because these colonial masters were in place, they accounted to no one, but to the queen, but to the king, or whatever the kingdom was. And they took these things. This are our resources that were supposed to build wealth over the years. They took this wealth and sent to their country to add it to what they had already. Hence, they appearing to be ahead because they looted what was ours and added it to theirs, whilst not paying for it. They use our labor, they use our resources, and then to build their country instead of building ours. So that is another reason why our African countries and other countries appear, because all the wealth that were invested in other nations for them to emerge, for them to be prosperous, ours was looted and sent away to somebody's country. So that's how come our countries appear less resource than other countries. It has nothing to do with color or leadership. Now, the fourth thing is that um, they normally talk about the despotic leadership these nations had under colonial rule. If anybody tells you that, in Ghana, we say Gettysburg. Last time we were in a, what do we call it, a transparency conference, and one of the chiefs in the Western region was telling her how Gettysburg and his cronies looted the resources of Ghana through the port of Takrady. You see, because, and that is a very sad commentary about us most of the time. Whenever narratives are written and handed down to us by people that were obviously our enemies, we take the narrative and and echo it as if that's the truth. We don't do any investigation. These people that ruled over the Africans, the French, the Spanish, the Portuguese, and the rest, they did not rule us with 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 kindness and benevolence. No, they ruled us in a very despotic manner. In fact, if it was today, we would have described them as dictators and despots. But now we call them honorable governor, right reverend governor. We call them with lofty titles because they were British, because they were Spanish. They ruled the Iron Fist. These were people appointed by another country. People who came in to rule us without any input from us whatsoever. And when they came, the only thing they did was to serve the crown, was to serve their kingdom. These were despots of the highest order. In fact, it's not like even other places where despots will build mansions, at least in their country. These people, whatever they built, whether it was railway, whether it was port, it was just to ship things out. And they did these things for decades. After looting Africa, after looting all these places, they turn around and claim we don't have infrastructure. The very thing they were supposed to build with our money, they claim we don't have it. The despot. So the consequence of the poverty in infrastructure in Africa now is a direct legacy of despotic colonial rule. Now, number five, I hope you're understanding. We are talking about why Africans live in the poorest of countries in terms of infrastructure, or blacks live in the poorest of neighborhood, are usually the least endowed in developed nations. We're explaining that it has nothing to do with nature, character, or color. It's everything to do with colonialism, slavery, and the past. Now, the sixth, the fifth reason, the fifth reason why it appears that um, African countries seem to be so least developed. Sometimes when these people explain how shocked they get at least how less developed than they thought, it shocks them. Why? Because one thing they are failing to understand is that the only places there were infrastructure in the time of the colonial system were the places that the colonial masters lived. It's not therefore surprising that when you go to most African countries, the most privileged place now for people to live are places that colonial masters used to live. This was a people and a government that came to serve them, they and themselves alone, and their government, and left the vast majority of the country into disrepair, into chaos. So, and those who live in Accra, the cantonments and region, all of these places were places that Europeans were occupying, and therefore they left the Africans to fend for themselves in the bushes, whilst looting the resources that were to be used for that purpose. So the consistent Um, and now that independence has been gained, or when independence was gained, somebody will say, when you gain independence, what did you do with it? Immediately we gain independence, they set themselves up in systems like the Commonwealth and other systems like the one that the French-speaking countries have, and the rest that the one that the Portuguese-speaking countries also have, and the rest. They set themselves up in some form of Commonwealth. And what did they do with the Commonwealth? They still make sure we will not go after our resources that have been looted. We will not ask for them. We will not fight for them. And then all the money they had looted, we kept it. We allowed them to keep it. And did not do any forensic audit, did not do anything to ensure that what had been stolen from us was returned. In fact, we were just happy to be free. To us, that was just enough. And yet there was more to it than that. These people have spent centuries looting us, centuries taking things without paying for it, and we did not let them pay a peso for it. But they were colonial masters who actually even got angry that people sought for independence and literally removed railway that they had built with the very money of the country, Guinea. Removed it and sent it away. These are the kind of people we are talking about. Now, so when these new nations are now being formed, the Ghanas and the Malis and the rest, and they're supposed to be allowed now to rule themselves. They're supposed to be allowed now to determine their own destiny. What happened? These former colonial masters, through their secret service, through their military wings, and through their, you know, foment trouble in these nations, choosing one leader after the other, no matter what the leader was. So that so long as the leader will keep their interest and allow them to keep milking the country, they supported such leaders and use the advanced status to remove leaders that they thought were troublesome, will not do their bidding. And yet, these ones will come and sit on TV when they set up their NGOs and talk like Africa needs saving. Africa and blacks need to be saved from ourselves. That we seem to have this penchant to bring poverty. After they have gone for mental trouble, after they have done everything that is in their power to deprive us of resources, after they have assassinated our best of leaders, after they have overthrown our best of governments and set up their own despotic ones, after they have done all those interferences and brought us to poverty because they actually put upon us incompetent leaders, they turn around and blame us once again for not developing, for not coming up with innovation, for not having systems, you know, for just allowing there to be a one man show when in fact it's their own creation. So this is indeed the reason why